And now for something completely out of left field. Or in my baseball diamond, the infield. There's a wonderful trove of Japanese-only PlayStation 2 games, so it only makes sense to finally parade one out into the spotlight, especially since there is a somewhat drought for this series as Netflix killed all hype. Let's talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Vento Aureo. My relationship with JoJo, as mentioned somewhere previously, is a bit of an odd one. My introduction to it happened way earlier than most adopters of the Bizarre. You get one of two replies in regards to JoJo. I picked it up during its time within the relative underground of the US, or I became interested after the David production adaptation of Part 1. The former is rarer than the latter, as this group had to suffer the likes of the Duang scans or make do with the OVA for Part 3 to tide them over, plus Heritage for the Future, but I don't fit into either molds. Instead, my first exposure to JoJo was an LP of this exact game, handled by Nakatolili and Elemental Ogre, and with myself getting back into watching LPs, why not have a send up to my roots? It's been a while since I tackled something out of the wheelhouse, so let's go about this the same way I did Kamen Rider Kuga. The man of the hour that doesn't need an introduction, but I will still provide one for him, is Hirohiko Araki. Ageless energy vampire that reincarnates every 50 years, a man who you wouldn't want to leave your dogs with, and a mangaka who has his art in the Louvre. While those first two factoids are jokes, he isn't Colin, and I couldn't tell you how many fictional dogs die over the course of JoJo, that last one isn't. Araki style draws from many sources both of the era, such as Part 1 having clear inspiration from 80s action flicks in the character design, and timeless masterpieces such as the works of the Renaissance masters. No lie, stop watching right now and pull up any Araki time-lapse video to see what I mean. He and Junji Ito I could sit and watch all day just seeing them showcase their craft. But I am jumping ahead a bit, so let's cast ourselves back to the beginning. Born June 7th, 1960, Araki was the oldest of three siblings, having two younger twin sisters. Sisters that would bully the future artist. As he explains in a lecture recorded by Kami Press, those sisters were quite a handful. For example, if there were 3 snacks, the sisters, upon arriving home first, would eat all 3 and then proceed to conceal any traces of evidence. Growing up, young Araki, thinking that there weren't any snacks, would think, "Man, I'm hungry," and go chew on something like a really old piece of kamaboko. And when his sister's evil doings came to light, a fight would erupt. And this would occur on a daily basis. He would often feel such a sense of exclusion and ill will towards his sisters that he didn't want to come home. This led to Araki holding himself up in his room so he wouldn't have to deal with the constant bickering and deriding from his sisters. All he had as an escape was his father's art collection. His father was an office worker with an eye for manga, while his mother was a stay-at-home wife. While I couldn't tell you what manga Araki's dad had in his stash, probably some highlights from the 70s, he also had some books on ancient Japanese artwork that Araki would pore over. It was perhaps from this that Araki drew inspiration to become a mangaka, fervor fueled by a friend of his complimenting his work in the 4th grade. One small issue, back then mangakas weren't considered highbrow. From the collector, after an interaction with a friend who complimented his work back then, he thought that taking on manga as a future career was an option to look into. In the 60s, striving to become a manga artist was something that people looked down upon, as it was not a conventional career path. So Hirohiko Araki set about practicing his art behind his parents' backs, and eventually submitted his first work during high school. Hooray! You might think, but all Araki got was the cold shoulder. While Yudata Mango, the duo of Takashi Shimada and Yoshinori Nakai, who created Kinniku Man, Masakazu Katsura, Video Girl I, and Zetman, and a bunch of others were getting picked up, mostly from winning the Tezuka Award, wink wink, Araki was left to question his choice of career and wallow in insecurity. But spite is one of the best motivators of all time. Thus, as Kami Press states in their transcript, but Mr. Araki could not understand why he was rejected and decided to finish off a submission on an all-nighter and go on a 4-hour trip to pay a visit to the editors in Tokyo and to ask them for an explanation. At first, he intended to visit Shogakukan, which published Shonen Sunday, but he was intimidated by the size of their building and decided to take his submission into the smaller Shueisha building next door. No joke, Araki was to the point of passing out as a rookie editor critiqued his work. The results were a bit of column A and column B. In his rush, Araki's artistry carried a sorta sincere roughness to it. The first thing to come out of the somewhat imposing editor's mouth was a comment on how Araki let the whiteout of his work leak. But there was promise to this attempt. Enough for the editor to give Araki 5 days to clean up the manga so he could submit it to the Tezuka Award. The name of this piece was Buzo Poker, which would win the runner-up prize for the competition and thrust Araki into the limelight. A bit of a funny, Araki would go on to say that this award left him a bit fuddled. I wasn't clear on what kind of manga artist I wanted to be. It was like I was just incidentally awarded the Tezuka Award. It wasn't really like I was aiming to win. While not the Araki as we would know him today, Poker Under Arms showcased a tiny preview of what the mangaka would become, featuring a somewhat kinetically unique art style, focusing on dialogue and intrigue, and featuring a bit of the old violence that would coalesce into his current style. The likes of his sophomore follow-up, Cool Shock BT, would be another step in the smelting process leading to the preludes for JoJo, Bao and Gorgeous Irene. Though some of you might know Bao off of his OVA run or his inclusion within All-Star Battle, Araki really started to think over his art style when drawing the Living Superweapon from Anime News Network, but Araki's art was still immature. His characters' faces and expressions were flat and their arms looked like pipe cleaners. Compared to other popular artists of the time like Tetsuo Hara and Tsukasa Hojo, his art looked cartoony and this had to change. Muscular actors such as Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger were extremely popular back then, said Araki in an interview in the back of Viz's JoJo's graphic novels. At the time, I was creating a story with a theme focused on the physical body, so my drawing style changed to a more muscular look. While Bao featured the blood, Gorgeous Irene had the beef. But the many sources of inspiration for Araki's style can't be understated. In fact, here are a few listed out by the collector. Paul Gauguin, Michelangelo, the fashion industry as a whole, fashion illustrator Tony Viramontes, and that guy's mentor, Antonio Lopez. Add on the likes of Fist of the North Star plus a fascination with musicians and songs, a lot of JoJo character names are from music, and you almost have a winning formula. Almost, as I've left out a key detail. A theme. Returning to the lecture, Kami Press's transcript reads as such. Araki was fascinated by mysteries ever since he was a child, fantasized about deserted islands and believed that King Kong and Nessie existed, and so writes his manga with mystery as the central theme. In JoJo, Araki wondered what superpowers really were and if he could portray energy itself, which led to parts 1 and 2 and the stands in part 3, which were like guardians who could destroy boulders and stuff. This would also tie into how Araki plans out fights within his seminal work. Battles aren't dictated by power levels within JoJo. A lot of creative usage of abilities, trickery, and plain outwitting your opponent is how Araki writes fights, such as Bruno's battle with the Grateful Dead, Rohan's quick-wittedness against Cheap Trick, and the finale of Stone Ocean. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure would hit the scene in 1987 within Weekly Shonen Jump, and the rest is history. It would become a smash hit in Japan, an underground sensation in America, and would receive world acclaim following many different storylines, called parts, and it would shape sections of popular franchises today, such as Persona. I don't feel the need to go deep into the JoJo storyline here, as it is so big, but just know that it follows one family called the Joestars, a quite extended family that all at least get called JoJo once due to their alliterative names, throughout history as they deal with the supernatural and villains alike. Parts 1 and 2 centered around Jonathan Joestar and Joseph Joestar respectively, and are more in line with Fist of the North Star as they battle vampires or pillarmen with the sun-based martial arts style Hamon, while Parts 3 and onward focus on spirit entities called stands that have an assortment of abilities, shapes, and personalities. Part 1 sees the death of Jonathan at the hands of Dio Brando, the kinda big bad of the franchise as he has hands in pies leading into Parts 3, 5, and 6. Hell, he ends up being the final fight of Part 7 via dimensional chicanery. Thanks, President Funny Valentine. Though since Part 7 takes place after the universe reset of Part 6, it isn't a one-to-one Dio. Again, I'm not going to go too hard into the plot of each part. Read them in your spare time or watch the anime. I'll end this small tangent with Part 5 follows one of Dio's sons, one Giorno Giovanna, as he aims to become a gangstar within the streets of Italy. On to the less expansive part of this section, JoJo and video games do have a prior relationship, appearing in the likes of Famicom Jump 1 and 2 alongside fellow Shonen Jump stars. It wasn't until the Cobra team developed 1993 Super Famicom RPG JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that the series would step into the world of gaming proper. And let's just say that the first attempt was definitely a game. Following the Egyptian road trip that is Part 3, the RPG suffers from bizarre, design choices, and isn't really fun to play. There's about half an idea there, and while JoJo can work in an RPG setting, the excellent fan game The Seventh Stand user proved that, it wasn't until Capcom picked up the license in sometime in between 93 and 98 that the world would be graced with a good JoJo game. That being the arcade classic, Heritage for the Future, which would later be ported to the PlayStation and Dreamcast. While I couldn't tell you how either did over here in America, totaling the sales of both versions in Japan gives you roughly over 2 billion yen. 8 more and you have the plot of Yakuza 1, so making a follow-up was a no-brainer to Capcom. While Heritage was a 2D fighter, this new game was going to be fully 3D, leading to the creation of a process called Artistune. Basically, it was Capcom's way of emulating the JoJo style. And what's more, Araki threw his hat in the ring to create unique pieces for the game which would follow Part 5, the mangaka himself getting the name changed from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure to GioGio's Bizarre Adventure to keep with the Italian theme. The game was even scheduled for an American release, a Eurogamer article reading as such. Capcom has rejigged a few of its upcoming release dates, with several PlayStation 2 games and one key Cube release slipping a week. Cell-shaded Racer Automobilista has slipped from the end of November until December 6th, while GioGio's Bizarre Adventure has slipped from December until Valentine's Day, February 14th. However, Devil May Cry 2 stands firm for March 21st. Yet, it was never meant to be, as while the game saw release on my favorite child, the PlayStation 2, in its native region on July 25th, 2002, it was never released anywhere else. As such, the only way to play is via emulation, and I will be using the English translation patch, as this game has one, and I only had one issue with this version. The opening tram level doesn't render in properly. Don't know why, and it's the only stage that has this problem, so... Ugh. This is going to be a preface. If you haven't read or seen Part 5, this adaptation of its story does not serve as a substitute. Characters can and do get dropped from the plot despite their importance, as Part 4's Koichi doesn't aid Giorno for the Black Sabbath fight, nor does Rolling Stones show up, and a lot of moments such as the Kraftwerk, Soft Machine, Babyface, Clash, Talking Head, and Metallica fights are skimmed over in favor of brevity. Like, all we get of Risotto in Super Story is his corpse, downplaying his showdown with Doppio. That said, our tale begins with a recap of parts 1 to 4 in a brief manner, introducing us to the Joestar family tree, Dio, and our technical main hero of Part 5, Giorno Giovanna. Illegitimate son of Dio that he fathered using Jonathan's body, making GioGio both a Brando and Joestar. As people not in the know about JoJo figure out how that's possible, and involves a stone mask, vampirism, and Dio attaching his severed head to Jonathan's corpse, Giorno's just hanging around performing his duties as a part-timer at one of Italy's airports when a gangster by the name of Leaky-Eyed Luca tries to shake him down. Unfortunately for Luca, Giorno is a stand user, the lad killing the ganger with golden experience. This catches the attention of Bruno Bucciarati, another gangster who tries to interrogate Giorno over the death of Luca.
お前がジョルノ・ジョバーナか。
あんた誰です？
涙目のルカが空港の外れにぶっ倒れてた。誰がやったのか調べる。空港の警備員に聞いたら、お前がそこにいたことを教えてくれた。ルカはギャングなんだぜ。奴のボスは自分の顔に泥を塗られたと思って怒っている。俺ね、人が本当のことを言ってるかどうかを汗とかで見分けるんだ。汗の味を舐めればもっと確実にわかるから。お前に質問する。空港で涙目のルカに会わなかったかい？
いいえ、知りません。涙目のルカなんて人は。
汗をかかないね。よし、信じよう。ところで、その手の中のものは何だい
？During the questioning, Giorno learns that Bruno is also a stand user, owning the zipper-based sticky fingers, leading to a scuffle. But while Giorno has Bruno on the ropes, he stops attacking him. Despite his gangster background, Bruno has a good heart. He hates that his organization, Passione, deals drugs to kids. This hits a sore spot for Giorno as well, who wants to join Passione so he can become the Don of the organization. In his words, to become a gangstar. To do so, though, Giorno must be initiated into the organization, requiring him to visit the capo Pulpo and follow his instructions, which boils down to keeping a lighter lit for 24 hours.
その夢の第一歩のため、何としてもこの炎を守らなくては。
おっと、危ない。すまんの。ご覧の通り階段掃除をしとったんじゃ。しぶきだけで水がかからなくてよかった。
なんてことだ。まずいぞ。まだ1時間しか経ってないのに炎が。なんてことだ。
炎がどうしたかの？まさかそのライターつかなくなったかの？おお、すごい明るいんでびっくりしたが、でも何も問題はないようじゃがの。お
かしい。再点火できるなんて絶対におかしい。再点火できたらテストの意味なんて何もない。
この魂、選ばれるべきものではなかった。
This is in fact a ruse. The lighter acts as a beacon for Pulpo's stand Black Sabbath, who immediately besets anyone who relights the extinguished flame. An old man is a casualty because of this, leading to Giorno defeating Sabbath and killing Pulpo on his way to joining Bruno's group. The team of Bruno, Giorno, Arancia, Abacchio, Mista, and Fugo all profit from the death of Pulpo as they gain his fortune by default, allowing the team leader to inherit the rank of Capo. That makes Bruno's group eligible for a secret mission from the boss, protecting his daughter Trish. But a group of assassins, Passione's own La Squadra to be exact, tried to stop Bruno's group as they tried to deliver Trish to her father. Adding Coco Jumbo and his stand Mr. President to the team, Bruno finally comes face to face with the boss, who only wanted his daughter delivered to him so that he could kill her. Thoroughly outmatched and severely wounded, Bruno escapes from the boss and switches the team's objective to figuring out who the leader of Passione is and stopping him for good. Another round of assassins, this time the boss's personal unit, the Unità Speciale, tried to kill the group on their way to Rome to pick up an object that will turn the tide in their favor. A stand arrow.
彼の体は限界に来ているようだった。自分の体が動かなくなる前に目的地コロッセオに到着しようと必死で歩いていた。 その途中なぜかトリッシュと出会い2人でコロッセオに入っていった。ブチャラティは気づいていなかった。自分と一緒にいるトリッシュが偽物だということを。一方でジョルノたちもヘリの男を倒した後少し遅れてコロッセオに入っていった。
次はどっちへ向かえばいい？
階段を登るんだ。トリッシュ、君に会えてよかった。負傷した俺をこうして連れてきてくれたんだからな。
ボス、本当に大丈夫なんですか？
ドッピオ、お前はバレはしない。ブチャラティのやつはすでに死体なのだ。私と娘は魂の形において似た匂いを持つ。その部分だけをお前に与えた。ブチャラティの見ているものは娘の形だけだ。そのまま気づかないふりをしろ。誰かいる。上階の石壁の影だ。やはり目的とは何者かと会うことだったようだな。
止まれ。そこで止まるんだ。一歩でもそこの階段を登ったら約束は消えることになる。
ドッピオ、なんとかして近づけ。
まずいよ、近づく前にバレちまうぞボス。
俺の名はブローのブチャラティ。あんたがボスを倒す可能性を持っていると言ったから信用してここまで来た。
分かっている。しかし君の隣にいる人物は誰だ？俺の持っているデータには記憶がどこにもない。
あるはずがない。トリッシュは組織のものではないが俺たちの仲間だ。スタンド使いでもある。
スタンドが見たい。そうすれば安心する、トリッシュ。
ボス、マジに何者だ？戦闘経験も豊富なやつだ。スタンドの間合いを確実に計算に入れている。あの男、何か持っているぞ。
あれはまさか矢か。なんで持っているんだ。そうか。一人心当たりがあった。あの男か。殺したはずのやつか。ならば俺が自ら戦うしかないな。
ブチャラティ、どこに行った隣のやつは？消えた。まさか。
これは試練だ。過去に打ち勝てという試練と俺は受け取った。え？お前もそうだろ？ジャンピエール・ポルナレフ。
貴様はまさかディアボロ。
数年前海にばらまいてやったはずのお前がどうやって生きていたのかはどうでもいい。重要なのはお前が何しに来たかだ。ブチャラティどもに何かを伝えようとしているな。
その階段に足をかけるんじゃねえ。俺は上、貴様は下だ。
お前が下だ、ポルナレフ。お前が地獄の下にいれば矢を何に使おうともう何も問題はない。
Part 3's Jean-Pierre Polnareff means to hand it off to the dwindling team, as Fugo left after the group betrayed the boss and Abakio died trying to get the identity of the boss, but cutting him off is Doppio, who in all actuality is the alternate personality of Diavolo, the Dawn of Passione. Pushed into a corner by Diavolo's King Crimson, Polnareff jams the stand arrow into his stand Silver Chariot, turning it into Silver Chariot Requiem, who body swaps everyone in Rome as it tries to leave the location. A body-swapped Bruno, now in Diavolo's body, prevents that from happening and passes off the arrow to Giorno before he dies. Narantia also dies as well during the Silver Chariot Requiem event, leaving Giorno, Mista, and Trish to take on Diavolo, who has freed himself from Doppio. Jamming the arrow into Golden Experience, Giorno batters Diavolo with Golden Experience Requiem, subjecting him to an end without ending. With most of the team dead and Polnareff inhabiting Coco Jumbo, Giorno becomes the new Dawn of Passione, ending the story. There isn't really much to analyze here except in the case of adaptation, and in that regard, if you know nothing about JoJo or Vento Aureo, do not play this game. It assumes you know the finer details of Part 5 and mostly hits the high points like Black Sabbath, Grateful Dead and Beach Boy, Notorious B.I.G., and the finale. So much is left out on the cutting room floor, which isn't a bad thing. This is a game after all, so tightening the pace to facilitate gameplay is the main goal here. But having this rendition of Golden Wind serve as anything other than a brief recap of the plot is doing yourself a disservice to Vento's plot. The same can be said for the Part 1 game, and I'm basically repeating what Tsnakera said there in terms of understanding what is happening. This game is definitely meant only for the fans, not as a way to introduce those to JoJo, and irony not lost to me. The first thing that will catch your attention is the artist-toon art style, which I want to say is kind of sort of the predecessor for how the 3D JoJo games would look going forward with All-Star Battle and Eyes of Heaven. Trying to replicate Araki's art style in a 3D space is a losing battle. Bandai would be struck with this for the Phantom Blood game. So instead of trying to copy Araki's unique artistry, Capcom sought out to invent a similar style that still kept to JoJo's roots. If I had to describe what the artist-toon art style is like, which I do, seeing as that is the point of LTA, it is a much softer cel-shaded look akin to, say, Borderlands, but it errs more towards heavy stylization as opposed to dumpy backwateredness. Vento Aureo is pretty to look at, another feather in the cap for the PlayStation 2, and it's neat to see all the stands and characters captured closely to their manga counterparts. Just seeing some of these stands, like Grateful Dead or Black Sabbath, in a 3D environment and still retaining their charm is an accomplishment. It helps that the game is animated quite well with the sound and voice work backing it up. As each character has their own idiosyncrasies, it is nice to see that picked up on in their animations.
とことん拷問してやる。
2枚
最初に言った通り、お前はもう終わってるんだ。死んでもらう。死んでもらう。
間違いないぜ。フーゴのやつは
そりゃそりゃ遅い。せっかく腕を失う覚悟までして外に出てきたっていうのに、こんな食らわせろ。いけ土星のがマイン・ザ・ミラー、最後の力を振り絞れ。いけ土星のが。
I think the one that really showcases how close to the manga Capcom wanted to be is with Purple Haze, as he does scrub his hands after landing a few attacks. He is completely unusable during the full animation, highlighting how much of a goofball Purple Haze is, only to be followed up with his level 3 stand shoot where he displays how brutal he can actually be. Bruno can zip and slide around with his zippers like he's done in the part, and King Crimson has both his overhead chop performed after a usage of Epitaph, mirroring the moment when Bruno attacked himself, as well as his punch throw. Each character has their own little nuances, as I haven't even brought up Gyakio or Polnareff. Since he's wearing White Album, Gyakio doesn't move normally, preferring to skate around. That can lead to him stumbling like a dumbass if Mista hits him with a stun shot, a hilarious outcome that sees the angriest man in the world spin out and take some time to recover. Polnareff is bound to a wheelchair, so he animates completely differently from most of the cast, as he has to flick his chair around to change directions. Getting knocked down, he lands on his side, forcing him to call upon Silver Chariot to pick him back up. This expressiveness is carried over to the in-game cutscenes that try to replicate the events of the manga as closely as possible. What is funny is that for a long time, the voice cast of this game was what I always pictured these characters to sound like. The anime uses a different cast, which I will say here isn't bad. My preference changes on which character we are talking about. I actually prefer Giorno's voice here than in the anime, as it retains that quiet fury the character is known for, while still carrying that hint of youth. I've always thought that the All-Star Battle in Part 5 anime voice sounded too old for Giorno, who's only 15. This is probably the most subjective part of the presentation from person to person, as this is all preference. Everyone here in the game does a good job and all the battle cries are exact. Guess that leaves the music, which isn't bad to say the least, but in the running for JoJo music, the only track that sticks with me is the revamped Polnareff theme from Heritage. The selection on display is inoffensive and fits the Italian theme, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to listen to it like the bangers from the Part 5 anime. Vento Aureo is a 3D action brawler with a focus on boss fights and each playable character having a different moveset. Right down to business, there are 3 difficulties, easy, normal, and hard, but I don't know what aspects are changed. I would assume enemy AI damage and health. Normal is auto-selected, and so I stuck with it. What isn't is the no censorship option nor autosave, so you might want to do that within settings before hopping into this game's story mode. Super Story. As the name suggests, it follows the skeleton of Part 5 where you take control of Giorno, Bucciarati, Abbacchio, Fugo, Narancia, Trish, and Polnareff as they battle against the gangstars of Passione. Level progression is linear as you start from Giorno punching the teeth out of Bruno on the tram to subjecting Diavolo to infinite deaths at the end. Each level is its own fight, and you only move on to the next one after you finish the previous battle. But who you play as per stage can be different. For a breakdown, Giorno has the most stages, followed by Bruno and Mista, then Trish, Fugo, Abbacchio, Narancia, and Polnareff all have 1 stage to their name. Basic controls are in play, left stick moves, but there are no camera controls. Each level is basically an arena with the camera far back enough to see all of it, and each character has specific quirks. Those quirks, of course, being the stands. Giorno has Golden Experience, Bruno Sticky Fingers, Mista Sex Pistols, Narancia Aerosmith, Abbacchio Moody Blues, Fugo Purple Haze, Trish Spice Girl, and Polnareff Silver Chariot. Why I want to list them out is that every stand has a unique moveset even if their stand archetypes are the same. Technically speaking, Golden Experience and Sticky Fingers both have the same core moveset, but their special attacks are different. While Golden Experience can generate vines and trees, Sticky Fingers can punch out zippers or throw out his hands. Each character has 2 movesets because of this, Stand Off and Stand On. When your stand is off, you aren't locked onto your opponent and you can't block, but some moves, like Bruno's Extendo Punch, are only available when your stand isn't out. Stand On locks you onto your opponent, all your attacks come from your stand, as in it will attack in place of the user, and you can block, but your stand meter starts to deplete, leading to a stand crash if the meter is empty and you take a hit. Being stand crashed means you can't summon your stand until the stand meter refills completely, and you are left in stun for a little bit after the crash happens. Essentially and ideally, you'll be switching your stand on and off in fights to prevent this from happening. The odd one out for this is Mista, as he doesn't have to worry about stand crashing, as he has to keep track of his bullet amount both in his gun and the Sex Pistols, but as a result, he can't block, instead fully relying on the dodge roll. Fugo and Narancia can't block either, but that is because their stands are remote types and operate farther away from the user, unlike Golden Experience or Sticky Fingers. The most important move for all the characters is the stand shoot, which changes between characters and even between on and off modes. For most, when the stand is off, a stand shoot will send their stand forward and do a simple punch. When on, the stand will do the traditional JoJo punch rush complete with the user's battle cry. What's more, the stand shoot can be charged during almost any action, as long as you haven't been crumpled or stunned by an attack, up to 2 levels. High level offshoots have the stand do a basic combo that typically launches your opponent, while on extends the punch rush and will always end with a knockdown blow. For a side tangent, getting hit and hitting enemies has one of 2 effects. You either stumble and hit stun or get knocked down. You can ukemi on knockdown blows via hitting the dodge button as soon as you hit the ground, as well as roll away Tekken style when on the floor. Wall crumples are a thing off knockdown blows, but you can still ukemi in those situations as well. Punch rushing also allows you to do joint attacks with your stand, as you do get a degree of movement during the attack. Infinites are possible with level 1 on stand shoots, as you can stun lock foes with attacks from the user into stand shoots. A major portion of the gameplay is dedicated to unlocking secret factors, which award not only points for end-level rankings, which unlock bonus material like concept art, the audio dramas that contain the missing stand fights and free fights, but more health and stand meter. Secret factors require you to know what actually happened during a set fight within the manga, as you have to recreate those same events. For example, a number of secret factors have you in fights with level 3 stand shoots, such as the case against Illuso, Pesci, and Cioccolata. That would be Ubasha, Abrivaderch, and the 8-page Muda respectively. Some secret factors are given to you automatically, but most of these are a case of the stage being a gimmick fight. Level rankings are scored from E to S, factoring in your remaining health and secret factors. The combination of your health and secret factors awards points as mentioned above, each stage having a total of 200 points to gain in Super Story, 100 in Free Fight. Free Fight is unlocked after finishing Super Story, but there's a catch. To unlock a Free Fight, you must score at least 150 points or higher in the prerequisite stage to unlock it for Free Fight. If you want to battle Pesci as Mista, you have to do well within the story version of the battle as Bruno. Lastly, every enemy you go up against is wholly unique. A lot of the encounters are spent around understanding how they operate, which can be double loaded like when you fight GioGio as Mista. While dying forces you to restart the stage from the beginning, stages are so short that a restart isn't too taxing. The number one aspect of Part 5 is the dedication to the source material and the aspects that matter, like whole scenes recreated in-engine kind of dedication. I brought it up earlier within gameplay, you get to knock out the Tooth with Golden Experience during the first Bruno fight, complete with the Zipper Man commenting on how it feels to be punched full of life, and the world's most terrible noise you've ever heard. Following up, there's the search for Bruno in the following level, taking advantage of Giorno's ability to give life to objects, transforming the knocked out Tooth into a fly that desperately tries to search for its owner, giving away where Bucciarati is hiding. Black Sabbath is nigh unbeatable in the darkness, but just like in the battle proper, dragging him out into the light deals considerable damage. The pained whale is the icing on the cake, paying back Pulpo's stand for killing the old man. In the arena, there are pillars that you can destroy, removing any footholds that Black Sabbath has, another callback to the manga and retroactively the anime. Formaggio might have one of my favorite secret factors, as it requires you to be hit with Little Feet's Shrinking Blade, and then avoiding the user's attempt to stomp and or grab Narancia. For as much as I'll rag on Illuso, spending 3 whole fights with him floundering between the mirror and real worlds does well to showcase how out-of-depth Giorno, Fugo, and Abbacchio were dealing with Man in the Mirror. This is capstone by what I said in the previous section about how the fight ends during the third encounter. Purple Haze beating the dog shit out of Illuso. My favorite fights in the entire game are Bruno's gambit against Prosciutto's Grateful Dead, and the absolute trouncing he gives to Pesci's Beach Boy. First off, the lead up into the Grateful Dead battle has the awesome recreation of Prosciutto's speech. The one where he explains to Pesci that once La Squadra has decided to kill someone, it's already done. While Black Sabbath is my favorite stand from Part 5, probably my favorite stand of all time, the duo of Prosciutto and Pesci are my favorite characters from the part, and seeing them have their bit is honestly cool. That is then followed up by probably one of the most accurate detailings of a fight within the game, as you follow step for step how it went within the manga, right down to launching Prosciutto out of the train for an instant kill. He is one of the only bosses in the game that has an alternate manner of defeating him, as yeah, you can just pummel him with sticky fingers, as Grateful Dead is a remote type stand, leaving its user unguarded, but there is nothing more satisfying than seeing Prosciutto fly out of the open zipper to his doom, only for him, with the last of his energy, call upon Grateful Dead during the Pesci encounter to sap your health until you whack him. While the Pesci fight is probably the easiest in the entire game, Beach Boy's line throw is not a real threat and you're only liable to take damage if you get close to Pesci, I do like the ebb and flow of it, as you're mostly capitalizing on when he's thrown out his hook to score meaty hits. GioGio's White Album, I would argue, is the most creative fight in the game, relying on that he can't be damaged from the front, and he has access to Gently Weeps' reflection ability, but Mista can attack him from range and stumble him with Sex Pistols, allowing the Gangstar free damage off a well-placed shot. I will say it was possibly my most second restarted fight, for secret factors, but being able to stick GioGio onto the lampposts that act as a final blow is another nice callback. Oh, and playing as Mista has one of the funnier character dialogues, as he mentions his bad luck if he has 4 bullets in his revolver's chamber. Another well-done battle, the first scuffle with Notorious B.I.G. has the movement gimmick where you must slowly move over to Giorno's hand brooch while taking care to knock over the seats of the airplane to distract the little parasite. While I don't have much to say about Chicolatta's Green Day, it is merely an okay fight with a slightly annoying stand, the 8-page Muda is still alive and well even in video game form. Another one of the more in-depth fights, Bruno's standoff of Sekko's Oasis has the hardest secret factors to get, as you must do them in order. First, you have to shake off Sekko's scent so that he loses where Bruno is, confirming that he senses through Oasis's mud. Then you pop the tire to form the idea of doing so when Sekko is looking for Bruno, then doing it, leading into a unique cutscene of Sekko reeling in pain from his burst eardrums. The finale is a tad on the weaker side, Final Diavolo not putting up much of a fight and SCR middling, but it is sweet to play as wheelchair-bound Polnareff as a remixed version of his Heritage theme plays. It is a shame that he's only available in one fight, as I don't know if any of the free fights grant him as a character to play as. Again, a lot of your mileage for this game is based on your relationship with the source material. That is an obvious statement, but you can hear how much gushing I'm doing for these tiny moments that get captured. Even titles like Budokai 1 don't have this level of exactness, and Vento Aureo was made around the turn of the millennium. Having any manga or anime-based game around the era put this amount of painstaking detail is something to applaud. Illuso's Man in the Mirror is where the first few cracks in Part 5 start to appear, as some of the level gimmicks, while truthful to the story, are unfun to play through. Illuso gets 3 fights to stink up the joint, suffering from 2 gimmick types: mirrored controls and separating your stand and user. That is what happened in the fight proper, and you do get to recreate Fugo's moments of intrigue as he figures out how Man in the Mirror works, but the transition to page and retroactively anime to a video game format just isn't fun to play through. First off, while left and right are opposites, up and down are not, leading to a control scheme that I couldn't wrap my head around, as it is half inverted, half not. Down and right will take you down and left instead of up and left, which wouldn't be a full issue if Illuso wasn't hyper aggressive. With how long hit stun lasts in this game, if you don't avoid his mirror shard barrage, you'll get hit by all of it, costing you more than a good portion of your health. Without secret factors, 2 handfuls of broken glass can easily put Fugo in the first encounter at death's door. To layer on top of this shit cake, a stand must be out to block, but because Illuso has split the user and stand into different worlds, your only defensive option is the roll, requiring stricter timing. As in, once Illuso darts into a mirror, you have to be pinpoint with a dodge. His mirror shard throw attack comes out especially fast, otherwise you're better off resetting. Illuso 2 and 3 suffers more from the stand switching issue, as the only way to lock onto an enemy is via turning your stand on, so prepare to wildly flail around as a Bakio and Fugo, hoping that Illuso crosses over. There's also his grab attack, which is unblockable and has massive range, which is always fun to get hit by. At least Purple Haze can juggle Illuso extremely well if you know the timing and gimmick with Haze. Almost all of the time survival fights, not counting Black Sabbath or the second Notorious B.I.G. battle, kinda suffer from the same issue of just being a time waste with no interesting flair. Surviving against Illuso is the same as surviving against Disguised Diavolo 1, the only difference being how their attacks come out, which for Diavolo is a bitch to deal with. Outside the final fight, getting close to Diavolo is a death sentence as he splatters you with King Crimson's stand shoot. This makes Polnareff's one fight more annoying than it has to be. He has no proper dodge and he can't guard too much as he needs Silver Chariot to lift him back up when he's knocked down. And while Bruno can at least deal with the faster than light punch, this leads into Epitaph. While for Polnareff and Giorno, Epitaph acts more like Dio's time stop, For Bruno, it acts as it should. Merely hitting Diavolo will see him teleport through the remove time and launch a counter. If he isn't staggered, a state I swear he naturally resists even when you catch him off guard, any attack thrown at him will be auto-countered by Epitaph. The only upside is that Diavolo does take a portion of damage when he uses Epitaph, but the following counter is especially difficult to dodge. Out of all the stages though, the escape from Sekko as Mista is needlessly bullshit. Taking damage isn't a possibility. Green Day auto-saps your health for free like Canadian healthcare. The only way to stave off damage is by getting secret factors. Tangent, some of the secret factors are a bitch to get, like the ones involving Bruno with Sekko or Mista with Gyakio, so do expect a reload as some only give you a single chance to get it. The Lion in Gyakio stage needs to be hit with a stand shoot, not a regular attack, and Gyakio can accidentally hit the Lion, forcing a restart. Back to the race to the end of the race. Sekko likes to pester Mista as he's climbing, but while his regular attacks are somewhat easier to dodge, at least when he gives you a chance, as his dolphin dive out of the walls can be instant and will probably send you down to the bottom of the level. For some inexplicable reason, Capcom gave Sekko the ability to freely dump you off at a lower portion of the stage whenever he feels like it. There's no way to avoid it, or if there is, I don't know is, and by the time you see the tell for it, it's already too late. It doesn't matter if you are at the second leg of the stage or third, he can bust it out when his AI allows him to be a dick. Two last little thorns in my side: the lack of a hard lock-on outside of stand mode, and what certain moves do are chinks in this game's armor. Hitting anything as Mista without locking on is a trial in of itself, and I couldn't tell you what some of the alternate moves do. I think Abakio has tandem attacks off Moody Blues' recording ability, but since I'm thrown into the deep end with Illuso, there's no time for experimentation. Likewise, Mista's ricochet shots with Sex Pistols are superfluous to all the rest of his moves, and poor Fugo has a taunt? Of some sorts that I don't know has a purpose. Out of all the characters, Fugo gets the worst, as not only is Purple Haze a power-type stand, so it punches its problems away, it's remote like Aerosmith. What an annoying combination. Much akin to the Kamen Rider game I covered earlier, Vento Aureo the game only really works in the weird bubble space it occupies. It is by no stretch bad, but shocker, only fans will get something out of this. It is fun in spurts, though the shallowness does shine through in how basic combat is, and while the attention to detail is neat, it is at the expense of the gameplay at times. File this one under look at it at a get-together. No, for real though, Netflix dropped the ball hard for Part 6. While the 6th entry to the series can be hit or miss sometimes, Dio's son's kinda feeling like an afterthought compared to Pucci, and there are some enemy stand users I don't really care for, like Dragon's Dream. Losing all the momentum built up after the announcement is squarely on Netflix's shoulders. It would be like if there was a massive hiatus after Kira got introduced in Part 4, or after Bruno gets annihilated by Disguised Diavolo in Part 5. Too much of a time gap can kill any hype for something like this, especially seeing that the release schedule for Part 6 has been split into 3 parts? Not even the longer Part 3 had that done to it. Part 6, once again put into the garbage bin, though this does add some worry to the eventual Part 7 anime if Netflix continues this ridiculous idea. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/let's talk about games, no apostrophe in the let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits and early screenings of episodes, plus the Showtime Reels. October's was mighty number 9, with this month's, November, as who says October is the only scary month, being Postal Redux. And as always, this showing of Vento Aureo is over, but stay tuned to our next feature involving a precursor to a certain Nintendo franchise, a developer with a past in footy and jazz.